G'day, folks. It's the coach here. Hope you are all in crab meta. We're talking Idoneth Deepkin. I thought I had a really good line, and then I forgot it. Maybe being the mortal human that I am, you would use your Aether C to haze me out. I am here with mortally wounded Chris. Chris is... Well, we used to be gaming buddies for years and years and years until you crossed the border. Has a great podcast, one of the original podcasters in Australia, Mortally Wounded with James as well. But you have picked up the Fishy Boys, and we're going to talk 3rd edition introductions, how you're thinking about the army, what have you learnt so far. Welcome back. I think last time I had you here, you were talking about tree elves. Now we're talking sea elves.
Yeah, it seems to be some kind of elf for me all the time for some reason, even though I don't associate as an elf player. Although I was on the Elf Bros, so maybe I should. But yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's it's been a while, but I have picked up the Deepkin. I probably started them towards the end of 2nd. Probably just before Broken Realms kind of came out and they got their changes, but I didn't have them playable at that point, other than just doing a kind of few proxy kind of games. But I kind of I wasn't really feeling the vibe to do them towards the end of 2nd, I think. So I didn't really touch them too much. And then 3rd came around and basically just been the army I've been playing since the beginning of 3rd, really. So I'm all in, and I've been painting my way through them. So yeah, I'm very much excited about Deepkin at the moment.
They're an interesting army because you're now the 2nd oldest battle tome in the game after Nurgle. And it's interesting, like reading your book, there's a lot of like 1st edition stuff. You're like, man, that needs to change. But then on the opposite, you're like, when this new battle tome comes, please don't touch it. Don't Slaanesh my army. Like, please don't Slaanesh my army.
Yeah, we've got a lot of reroll ones in the game versus most armies. They're kind of going away. Although apparently Slaves to Darkness Lynch is fine to just keep reroll ones to save. But
Daughters of Cain has still got it, and they only just got a battle tome before 3rd edition. So there's some weird rumors that Daughters of Cain are getting a new book, but like they only just got a book. So maybe rerolls are still going to be in select armies.
Yeah, I think there'll be a few where it's okay. And I don't know, in Daughters, I kind of think it's okay, to be honest, because especially the meta, I think if you look at Daughters, they don't actually have anything that's got 3-up saves, like anything base with a 3-up. Even Marathi's a 4-up. And I think in the meta now, that puts you down a peg. And so I think them keeping reroll ones, and they're not getting it until like the 3rd battle round. Obviously, you can play around that anyway, but 3rd and 4th battle round, it's not from the start. It doesn't feel too bad, but yeah, stuff like a whole Zinch marked army just all the time getting reroll ones to save, and saves is the big one now. That is strange that stuck around, but Deepkin, it's nice. We've got a lot of reroll ones at the moment. You can get it on hits and wounds in various builds, which is really good. So you can have them super consistent, which I think I'm really enjoying. But they don't have mortal wound protection. And I mean, you've just seen all the Stormcast and the Cruel Boys. They are spitting out mortal wounds left, right, and center, which I think they've done because they know that they've increased how good armor saves are in the game as well. And so Deepkin have got some really good stuff going into 3rd, but then they've obviously got some glaring weaknesses as well. So.
Yeah, no, they're an interesting faction, and it feels like for a long time, they've been fleshed out. It was mostly about what flavor eels in most part, right? You had your defensive eel, you had your offensive eels. You might have had a different variety of like 9s and 6s and 3s, but ultimately most of it was around eels. And I know towards like late 2nd edition, we started to see the turtle come in. We really started to see the value of turtles. We've had War Scroll changes to the sharks. Broken Realms of Morathi, for anyone who hasn't seen that book, brought in a whole bunch of new War Scrolls, some new abilities like your Deep Mare, and I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, and I'm really curious to understand how you're thinking about 3E. For anyone who doesn't know Chris, by the way, Chris is definitely one of the great minds in Australian Age of Sigmar, always in the top 10s. I know he's a bit uncomfortable now, but you are always in the top 10s, always doing well, and you're always doing off meta lists as well. This won't be all just like, I don't know, crab meta. No, but we're talking very competitively. But I would expect, if you're listening to this, Chris will have a few curly ones to throw in, and I'll want to know why. I'll never forget the CanCon that you brought Khorne, and you allied in a wizard. Like, I just felt dirty. I'm like, how dare you bring a wizard into Khorne? But
yeah, I think there was multiple. It was more than just a wizard. It was summoning pink horrors into a Khorne list and stuff like that. But yeah,
I'm pretty sure Khorne smited you. But let's talk third. Let's unpack third. First off, just high level overview. How have you found Deepkin in third, and what have you found has really worked for you right now?
So third, just from an overall perspective, like not just Deepkin only, I'm loving the addition. I was skeptical about all the tactics and the command point stuff because I'd heard a lot of things like from 40k, and I was like, oh, I don't know about that. But I think every time we get skeptical about a change, when it actually happens, it's not as severe as we're expecting, or we actually try it and it's really cool. I've really been enjoying it. There's a few things I think it has added a little bit too much potentially in bloat in terms of heroic actions, the amount you can do in both hero phases, things like that. But it becomes pretty manageable because 90% of the time I'll just try and get an extra CP. Occasionally it's, you're trying to kill this guy, I'm going to give myself +1 save for this turn, and +1 to wound. And then sometimes it's, maybe I want an unbind, but really it's I want a CP, and so that's not too challenging to do. The main thing I found is just it takes longer. Again, I don't believe the game is a 2.5 hour game anymore. For 2K standard points, I genuinely think it's more a 3 hour game, if not more. Any tournament, to be honest, I would be wanting to see 3 hour, if not 3 hour 15 rounds at the moment, just for people to get used to it, because I think more than ever the introduction of battle tactics means that the start of turn now, people used to complain about Tzeentch hero phases taking 45 minutes to an hour, and that was the person going, cool, it's my hero phase, I'm going to cast this spell, now it's okay, it's my turn, let me plan my turn in my head for the next 5 or 10 minutes to select my battle tactic for the turn, and then everything else I do is going to be around achieving that battle tactic for the turn, because they're so important for scoring. And so I think you do now just sit back and stop for 5 or 10 minutes at the start of the round, unless you've been in a position where you've been able to plan ahead in your opponent's turn and gone, look, as long as this happens, I know I'm doing this. Which, like with anything, the more you play the game and the more you get used to it, that will happen. And you'll be able to plan kind of what you're going to do, or plan a number of scenarios. But sometimes things happen, battle shocks go the wrong way, or something changes and you go, oh, what I'm actually going to do, I was going to do monstrous takeover, but actually they've got something that could redeploy into range and stop me getting it. And then it's also thinking not just for that turn, but you've then got to go, okay, well, if I do this tactic this turn, it means I can't do it in another turn, which means I'm going to have to try and do these other tactics instead. And so sometimes there's been times where I've been playing and I've gone, this would be an easy tactic now, but it's also an easy tactic for me to get later when I'm not sure when I'll be able to score some of the other ones. And so I just think the start of turn takes a lot longer now. And it's the main thing I think has changed about thinking about the game from second to third, is about that tactic, more so than like, I need to get on all the objectives. That's the other thing that's changed, is objectives are obviously still important, but the number of objectives you need to control, I really don't think is as important anymore. A lot of the time, if you have 2 objectives, you're okay, because generally it's score 1, score 2, score more. And so on any of the missions that only have 3 objectives, if you hold 2, you have more. And so there's a bunch of missions now where I've played them a few times and then gone, do you know what, in hindsight, why am I going for 3 objectives? And I've stopped doing it because I'm so used to trying to get every objective and being like, well, if I go first, I'll go get that objective. And now I'm going, my army wants to castle. I don't want to do that. I'm just going to ignore one. And so be it. Like, especially if I don't score it, a lot of the time, if you just go put 2 models on the edge of an objective to take it, you don't actually score any extra points potentially based on how many are there. And then your opponent gets an easy conquer. They just move on to it and take it off you. Whereas if you don't take it, you're not giving them a conquer easily, because if you're bunkering down over 2 and you're controlling your whole army in that defensive bubble, straddling 2 objectives, because the board's got smaller, So your army can be on objectives and cover a significant amount of them being closer. And so I really don't see myself spreading out anywhere near as much as I did and trying to get all the objectives. It literally is going, am I going to get 1, 2, and then can I get more this turn? And a lot of the missions, you actually can't get more. Like the Vice is almost impossible to get more for the first few turns because they start in the backboard edges. And it's like, you're not going to get that. And then when it moves, your opponent's had a turn, you're still probably not going to get it. And so that one really is I'm probably not going to get more until battle round 3, maybe, unless you've got an extremely powerful kind of alpha army and you're playing into an easy matchup. But you've really got to go, I'll just have my 2, and next turn I'll just have my 2, and then you see how the game progresses. Whereas before, all the missions would have been like, I've got to get on all these objectives now and I need to control them and stuff like that.
And that is a massive change. Like, I want to unpack all that because you just dropped a massive monologue, but it was a very important one. No, like it was good, right? There's a lot of things you said there, right? Because there has been a lot of changes, and I want to unpack in a minute what it means to you as a Deepkin player, right? So let's do some rapid fire questions. First off, the board size changed. Now, that means a lot of things, right? And the first one is it makes things like you're coming in from reserves potentially harder. I say potentially, right? Because there's other factors about to come in. But from a Deepkin point of view, board size changes, what have you found?
Yep, no, you hit the nail on the head there in terms of if you're going to take models off with the Soul Scryer and come on from a board edge 9 away, I don't actually know if you do it much. I pretty much in all my games am just starting my Soul Scryer on the table. The couple of times I've left him off, it's when I know I'm going first, so my opponent hasn't had a chance to move. But I don't think I would recommend doing it if you're knowing you're not going first, because all it takes is an opponent to move some troops, not even that far up the board. And because of the board being smaller now, them pushing up means when you come on 9 away from them, you might as well have just been in your deployment zone, because you could actually, Deepkin is so fast anyway, you can be closer to them than if you had come on from the board edge. The only thing I would say is there's certain things in the game, which is basically one of the times I tried it recently, like Bellacore, that's quite prevalent, where they want to select key units and make you not be able to use them for a turn or potentially 2. He can't do that to units that aren't on the table. And so that's potentially an option for taking your key units that you don't want to get Bellacored off and dropping them on, especially if it's kind of combat units that want to charge, because obviously you're 9 away, your Soul Scryer makes that charge a 6 basically. So things like you could take the Leviadon off the table, know that you can bring it on somewhere to give coverage to your troops, and then it can probably make a charge, be right in your opponent's face. So things like that, it has been a big consideration from the board changing. The other one for Deepkin is that you really can basically just deploy defensively in a castle, and then with eels quite comfortably make turn 1 charges onto your opponent's home objectives and be behind them. In fact, like I have, especially in lists I've been doing where I can run and charge turn 1, eels go 14, so I can potentially just go 20. You think most missions you're 18 or 22 inches apart at most. Yeah. If you move 20 inches, you don't even need to move 20, you move 19 because you've got to be 3 away. And then if you get a charge +3, the eels can re-roll. You're quite often getting 11+ inch charges, and you just fly over them and you're behind them. You're basically on their backboard edge. And so it does mean that if your opponent wants to screen you out, they have to really like bunker down and put loads of their stuff all together, which you can exploit potentially if you want to give away. If they've sat back defensively to create this tight bubble, you can go, well, you can't really move forward as much anymore. But it does give Deepkin the ability to kind of be defensive, but also know that if someone gives them the turn, they can still reach out and hit their opponent turn 1.
You're noticing as well, like, because there are less objectives on the table, and as you mentioned earlier, the incentive to go for more objectives. Like, there was times where, like, it'd be 5, 6, even 8 objectives, and if you want to win the game, you want to score as many of those points. Especially where there was combinations, like have these 2 objectives, you'll get bonus VPs. You used to have to spread out your force, and you'd have to have multiple various threats that could spread out, act independently. But you're seeing hero hammer now. A lot of armies bringing in big hero monsters, and even if they're not unique, you're seeing a lot of that type of high armor monster hero kind of units. But also you're seeing armies not spreading out nearly as much, not having as many screens as they used to, and they're probably we call them bubble wrapping or screening. Essentially, you're kind of keeping them as a cohesive force and kind of moving up like what they call the Death Star or like a bubble, right? As opposed to what you used to have, like, I'll have some troops and a hero or two, and then, they go spread out. How are you finding that's working with Deepkin? Is that incentivizing certain models? Are you finding that is playing to particular strengths?
Yeah, I think Deepkin want to play as a bit of a castle and a bubble. Certainly, how I've been playing them anyway. There's probably 13 to 1500 points that I basically find myself going, this is kind of the core of any army I build, and this will always go in, which is a Leviadon, an Eidolon, a Soul Scryer, at least 3-ish lane. But then it's kind of playing around that. Obviously, you're going to have to fill out your battle line. So depending on who your general is, you're either going to take more ish lane, or you're going to have reavers and thralls, which you didn't see before. But most of that army all wants to be within 12, in my case 15 of the Leviadon, because I will always, the mount trait I take is always to increase its bubble, because I found that extra 3 inches is actually often the difference between you getting the buff or you don't. So you want to stay kind of within 15 inches of that turtle. And then the Eidolon as well goes into that, because his buff is +1 to wound wholly within 18. So you basically find that you go central of the objective. So on one with 3, I'd be looking to go between 2 of them rather than on the center of the middle one. I'd often just pick which side I probably want to go, refuse flank style, but the army's quick enough to go across if you wanted to switch. But the Eidolon wholly within 18 of him, the turtle wholly within 15 of them, eels either side, and then stuff and Soul Scryer in the middle is generally how I've kind of been finding that the army wants to play in terms of castling up. And so the board getting smaller, the objectives becoming closer, and there being less of them, I think benefits Deepkin being able to play in that bubble, because 15 inches from that turtle is, you can go 30 inches wide, and that basically gives you control of the main part of the board that you need to in terms of objectives. So you usually are within your buff auras, but you do come into problems. It's a different issue if you're playing the reavers and the thralls. You can find yourself out of position of command abilities. The wholly within 12s of heroes does become an issue, because they don't actually have unit champions. They're a weird army where their core don't have unit champions.
I was going to say that you don't have the elites, which makes it a bit harder. And I want to talk that in a second. But the turtle, in my opinion, and you've obviously already confirmed it, is perfect for the castle. Rewind this to like early second edition, you didn't really have that castle build. All of a sudden, you're starting to see the turtle being so important to the middle. Whether you had offensive or defensive eels, whether you had units of sharks or whatever it was, that turtle was the center, and it's now that's really playing to your strengths. And I was surprised by how generous those auras are now. 18-inch auras, 15-inch auras with the smaller board size. The turtle's got a larger base. You'll find a lot of your army can fit. And before I talk about, like, one of the other big changes I was thinking about, which is kind of impacts Deepkin, but it also doesn't, is coherency and reinforcements. And what I mean by that is, one, Deepkin has always sucked with the 32 or more bases. Like things like thralls, one of the biggest gripes of most people has been thralls on 32 mils with 1-inch weapon. Going into, reinforcing your eels to go from 3 to 6 to maybe even 9 if you've got battle line eels, then brings coherency into play. How have you found coherency and the reinforcement stuff playing in? Like, I'm sure you're going to be okay with your 4 reinforcement points at 2K, but how have you found those two kind of mingling in Deepkin?
Yeah, the issue of 4 has not been a problem for any lists in terms of number of points. That's been fine. The coherency has been generally okay. It's kind of interesting, actually, because people complained about the 1-inch reach on thralls before, when you could literally just go a model with almost an inch gap between them. And so, like, units at 10, like, to be honest, I think that's fine, because on 32s that covers a big space. You could wrap bases. It was just it it's basically always prohibited you kind of running more than 10s, like 20s or 30s is where you would struggle. So the coherency change I've found for thralls hasn't really stopped me, because you can still get them in. You just don't actually go base to base. If you stay about half an inch out, you can stagger and fit them around and still stay within an inch of 2 models. You can play risky and just do triangles on the end as well if you want to string, but you don't really need to. I've generally been finding I put 6 on the front with like little half-inch gaps between them and 4 behind on the 2 sides, and then that's pretty short frontage that can go in, and it's all coherent and it can all attack. So I've not really found that to be an issue. I did try recently like to do a list with 30, and it just didn't work. I literally just had like 20 guys standing in the back not doing anything. That was partly like opponents' unit sizes and being able to move and not getting big runs and big charges and stuff like that. But most of the time you aren't going to see the benefit. You're not going to get 20 and you're not going to get 30 in combat for sure. Even though I think they on paper they are amazing, but I don't think you'll ever be in a situation where you get all 30 into combat. As a wound sink, you could maybe do it that way if you want to charge them in, let them take a hit first, but you're going to lose a lot. And if you do that, you need to make sure you've got a hero in range to keep them immune to battle shock. But otherwise, like reavers and stuff, I've found good, because that's the big unit for me that I think has changed the army from 2nd to 3rd is reavers, because of various rules from 3rd ed. The main one being Unleash Hell. Because to be honest, I'd never really looked at reavers as a battle line option, and then I was like, oh, actually they do become battle line if you just take basically any of the heroes that's not a king, which everyone always did to make the eels battle line. And so having a 30 block of them, obviously it's using your reinforcement points, but I've not found that to be an issue. But it means that you get to Unleash Hell with 30 guys, and when they're close range, which you will be with Unleash Hell, you're getting 90 shots because of their triple shooting ability at short range. And so reavers has been the thing that's really changed how Deepkin play. That they're not, that's a unit of 30 guys that are on 32 mil bases, but because it's ranged, the coherency thing's really not an issue. You just put them in a block of between 10 to 15 wide, and it's either 2 or 3 ranks deep, and they sit behind your screens. And that's easy to keep coherent. And so that's really not been a problem. So I don't think it's too much of an issue for Deepkin. It's not going to impact the typical.
What about eels? What about eels? Because like that was probably the other piece, right? Because the minute you start going over 5 models, and obviously reinforcing eels once puts you into 6, and we start having a few more issues. Does that then disincentivize you from going like units of 9, or how have you found the 6 piece?
I have never taken a 9. I don't think I ever would take a 9. The reinforcement, the coherency is one reason for that, but the other, to be honest, is just points investment in one place and not being able to string out. And I think it's excessive. I don't see myself ever seeing the tactical advantage of taking a single unit of 9, to be honest, because you don't need to mystic shield them. Like you can use all out defense on them. You get the +1 naturally from a turtle. Turn 1, you can be in cover anyway. Like in terms of their armor saves for Ishlane, I just don't see the point. Morsar, I think, are too expensive now for in the context of the army. Like other armies I know would still love to have a unit like Morsar, but in the context of Deepkin and what other units you can get for the points, I don't think Morsar are worth it anymore. And so I would never be investing in a unit of 9 of them. Even 3 I've tried and I just drop it. I would just take it and take other things. The 6 I have taken multiple times for Ishlane, and I don't think it's a problem, because you can, in terms of the coherency, you can basically do what people are calling the bird feet, where you can put two essentially you can have 4 long and then 2 in the middle. And as soon as you lose 1 model, you don't have to worry about coherency anyway. And so you really don't lose that much in terms of screening capability compared to what you used to lose with them. And they can all still fight easily. You just have that one guy in the middle. They can all fight with 1 inch range. So it's not been an issue. I generally don't think the coherency changes have had much impact on Deepkin. Certainly from what I've found, definitely compared to other armies. I think Deepkin are one of the armies that's probably fine and not really thinking about it that much, to be honest.
There's always been like a lot of like, you take one shark or two, units of two sharks. You have a lot of independent characters. You have the turtle, which is by itself. Probably at worst, as you've said, you would see a lot of like units of sixes and people. Sometimes they went in units of 9, but I used to see a lot of people taking multiple units of 6 eels, whether it's offensive or defensive eels. So you're probably right, especially, and it's interesting, and we'll talk a bit more about your list. We've actually got 2 lists because you've got 2 different theories you're kind of testing at the moment. But it's interesting to hear that reavers are finding a place, and having Unleash Hell, obviously all out attack, not at the same time, but there are different ways, especially with your reroll shenanigans in the Tides of Death, are playing well to your strengths and the board size and the auras, and just overall it sounds like you got a lot of good things happening, and probably one of the reasons why Deepkin has survived the meta for such a long time. Like, the book has relatively been unchanged for 2 editions.
Yeah, Deepkin have always been good, and it was funny. 3rd came out and the chats were kind of saying, I think Deepkin are bad for the first time. Like, I don't think they, like, a lot of the chats were like, nah, people are selling their eels. The Morsa had gone up again. They have 4+ base saves on a lot of the stuff. They don't do many mortals. And I was like, oh, I don't know, compared to some of this other stuff coming out. But then looking at it and going, oh no, it was basically the Reaver change, and seeing how that changed the army and gave you power where you previously didn't have it. The eel only lists, I think, are gone. Yeah. In terms of going 5-0, even 4-1, I think you'd have to play pretty well now to go 4-1 with like eel only lists. And they're not optimal. Like, I think every single Deepkin list should be taking a turtle. And that was since Broken Realms Marathi. Like, that
I would literally coming out of my mouth was like the minute Broken Realms Marathi came in, rewrote the War Scroll for Leviadon, brought in the Leviadon traits. I think I started noticing people bringing in the turtle again. It seemed like it was its time to shine.
Yeah, I mean, generally what it did as well in terms of it adding to the defense of units all around it, it really didn't change much on paper, but it was a huge change because it used to be stuff wholly within like 9 of it or whatever got cover, but Deepkin naturally get cover in the first battle round, and so cover didn't stack with cover, and so it didn't really do anything. And then all they did was go, okay, 8 or less wounds, which is everything in the army other than the turtle and an eidolon within range of it gets +1 save, and so now that stacks with cover. And so you either in the first turn, basically you deploy your army in this huge bubble around it, and everything has got +2 to save in the first battle round, essentially, which is amazing. And then they kind of also made it make your Namati, which people weren't taking much, which is your Thralls and Reavers, hit better. And so any enemy units within range of it, Namati get +1 to hit against them. And its buff is shooting and combat, which is why it's then in 3rd ed played so well into helping the Reavers do the output. And the Eidolon change as well went from being like a 9-inch reroll 1s to wound, I think, in combat aura, to an 18-inch +1 to wound, shooting and combat. And so that's really good. It's ironically not good for the Eidolon himself because both of his good profiles already wound on 2s. So for him, you would have preferred his old one to let him wound on 2s rerolling 1s. But for the rest of the army, it's such a multiplier that it's definitely better than it was. And then that Eidolon gaining a 5+ after save as well just made them so much more survivable, which has really helped. It's the only thing in the army that comes, well, other than Lotan, that comes with a ward save. And so a 5+ ward save on a 12 wound model that's got a 3+ save that heals whenever it charges and always retreats and charges is so good. He's really hard to pin down, but he has changed in his role because typically the artifact everybody took was the Cloud of Midnight. They put it on the Eidolon. He went up front ahead of the army and went, oh, you've got shooting, not this battle round, and just shut it all down completely. And then went in. That doesn't work anymore. And so immediately, as soon as they took that, they made that change, which I think was a 3rd ed change in the initial FAQs, that that Cloud of Midnight doesn't now, if you pop it, he doesn't count as the closest unit. So you can then target the next closest unit for shooting, which essentially makes the point of it irrelevant. And so now I've basically, that's become one of the new generic artifacts. He's already got a 5-up ward save, so he's not going to take the Amulet of Destiny, and so he's a perfect candidate to become a wizard, because they don't really, typically Deepkin have never really had any wizards, or maybe one.
Is it your Soul Scryer, or what is it? Isn't there? Well, what's it? The Tidecaster would sit at the back. You'd have one spellcaster, and from memory, the Eidolon, is it the Storm or the Sea, whichever one the wizard one is.
The
like
Sea.
You never saw it on the table. Like it was bad enough to get the combat focused Eidolon on the table. You never saw the wizard one. People I think tried it for lols, and for most of it, it just didn't compete in the wizard meta. It was almost like the battle mage on Griffin in Cities of Sigmar. It's like, yeah, I could take it, but there's just so many other things I could do with those points, and most of the time, it was just eels.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think the wizard one still doesn't really get a look in, certainly competitively. It's the more expensive of the two, which baffled me when they did the points, because the combat one is just better. Like that +1 to wound aura, he fights more. Like the wizard just isn't good enough. He's a 2-cast wizard, and he's okay in a fight, and he's decently survivable, but he's got no bonuses to cast. And I think if you're trying to cast, you're playing into Techless, you're playing into Croak, you're playing into this like Nagash, you're playing into a
lot of change. He's always been a jack of all trades, but just a master of none. Like he never won the wizard battle when there was a wizard on wizard. Like it's just,
yeah. And for the equivalent points, like you look at Arcan the Black, who casts 3 spells, not 2. He's got built-in +2/+2. Like he's equally as fast. He's got a ward save. He's got the same 3+ save. 13. Like they're basically similar profile. Arcan probably hits about the same in combat, but he's a much more proficient wizard, and he is cheaper and heals your army. So I just don't think the C stacks up, unfortunately.
And you don't want it in combat. Like you don't want. It's not like he's got a profile that you want to get it into combat, like old Manfred, which was pick your battles. You just don't. That's a last resort. But to Eldon's question, like, is it a good time to start Deepkin? Absolutely. Probably some of the most beautiful models in the game. I absolutely love. I love it, and I mean, you've got Cragnos. Like first up, like you have one of the best models in the game. It is crab meta. Forget Cragnos. It's all about Cragnos. Have you thought about including a crab in your Deepkin list? And tell me why the 100 reasons why the answer is yes.
So I have run Gotrek in a few Deepkin lists to try him out, and my Gotrek is standing on the crab from the Deepkin Underworld's warband. So he is literally Cragnos. Have you seen the
mashup on Reddit between someone's got the beard and I think the axe and put it in a crab? Like the crab's got a beard and it's holding the axe. It's glorious. Yeah. But have you thought about the Underworld's warband? Because a lot of the time, the Underworld's warbands just don't work. Like they're cool alternative sculpts, but they're just not good synergistic in the army. With exceptions, there's a few exceptions, but most of the time, how have you found Cragnos?
I haven't used the Underworld's warband in an actual game. I don't think I would. I think, unfortunately, they fall into 95% of Underworld's warbands where they don't serve a role. They're just wasting points that you could spend on other things. But yeah, it's not something that I've really invested that much time into, to be honest. I read the scroll. Nothing jumped out at me as being good. The points are usually a bit expensive because it's a hero plus another unit, and it's just not worth it. In my opinion, anyway, and so I haven't really given it much thought, to be honest.
And often those units are unique as well, so you can't put on generic. Like I know my daughter's a Kane. I've thought about like Morgraith, but I can't put Curse on her. Or there's a lot of the time that they become challenging. Three burning questions before I want to get into your list. And I'm sure the chat's got a lot of questions. They're all throwing stuff at me, and one of them's already coming from the chat. You mentioned Gotrek. Thoughts on Gotrek in the meta or in Deepkin? Because I've heard some interesting people bringing out lists and using some of the Deepkin rules to supercharge him. So I'd maybe get your thoughts first.
So yeah, Gotrek has always been one of those things where Deepkin was the best army to put him in because of the fact that it has the Iron Rack Enclave. And basically what that means is that allies, which Gotrek counts as if you put him in, get to use the Tides of Death battle traits. And so that means that you've got cover turn 1, you've got run and charge turn 2, which is massive on something
That's the big one because he's only got a movement of 4.
And then you've got fight first turn 3, and then retreat and charge turn 4.
Which and can then obviously naturally do double fight as well, right? He always naturally double fights at the end of combat.
So it's 2, 3, 4. And don't get me wrong, they are great buffs on Gotrek. And I have tried him. I've also played against someone else with Gotrek in their list while I was playing Deepkin without Gotrek. Gotrek against Deepkin is an issue. He's very hard for the army to deal with. Basically that's the reavers' job, but it relies essentially on Gotrek coming at you, being in range of your Soul Scryer, you curse him in your hero phase, and then you shoot him off. Outside of you being able to position to get a curse and then roll the 4 up, you can make it 3 up if there's mystical, etc. But outside of you being able to put a curse on Gotrek and then peppering him with reavers, I don't think the army kills him, or it doesn't kill him quick enough to not lose half the army to him anyway. And so he is an issue against Deepkin. As I say, I've tried putting him in, and basically my experience is Iron Rack is not a good enclave for the rest of the army versus the other options. And so you're basically making 1,600 points of your list worse to make 400 points of it better.
You're a one-trick pony. You are literally building this one-trick pony. And I think one of the cool things that Deepkin has up your sleeve is you have the movement to avoid him. You can get around him, and compared to some other armies that, not as fast, you can move around him and really limit his impact if he's coming at you.
Yeah. And so, I mean, when I played against someone using Deepkin with Gotrek, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to put reavers on the front line, because he knows that that's the thing that's going to kill him, because it's weight of dice that takes down Gotrek. And so even without curse, potentially you should, if you get 90 shots into him, I think you can take him out. It takes a little bit more than that, but 90 shots and then a standard shoot will kill Gotrek without curse. So I put them on the front line because I had choice of who goes first. So then my opponent put Gotrek back because he didn't want me to be in range. So then I gave him first turn knowing Gotrek couldn't get to me. And then you can just move away anyway. And so then his Gotrek just didn't do anything for 3 turns anyway, even though he was in Iron Rack and had run and charge turn 2, because he deployed him back, because I have the one threat that can deal with him. You have that choice. So you can play around him if you come up against him. The reason I did put him in is because Archaon is such a problem for the army. And I genuinely went into a nightmare rabbit hole for about a week of, I don't know how I deal with Archaon. And so I was like, Gotrek deals with Archaon, but I don't then think the rest of the army is good enough to kind of make up for that. I haven't tried, actually, I think I have tried Gotrek not in Iron Rack, just in the army, but not getting the run and charge. And I think he's too easy to, I did, but it was against super control Tzeentch Be'lakor, so we didn't get to do anything anyway. It might be okay in others because the board is smaller and you've generally got enough speed and pressure that you can probably do enough to your opponent, pin them in turn 1 or so. Give Gotrek the time he needs to move up the board onto an objective. After your eels have pinned stuff, then he could go in. So I might try him out a little bit more, but I don't think I'll change my conclusion that he's probably not worth it. I think the list loses a lot of the things that make it strong by not having those 435 points to spend on the other elements you need to make the list work.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that assessment, because he is a lot of points involved into your list. You really need to make it work. And I guess it's what's the trade-off in including that, and do you change your sub-allegiance just to make the most of one model when a lot of people are getting smarter now on how to avoid him, and they know what he does, right? Often he's in Hunters of the Heartland. People know, where to kind of deploy and try to bait him around, and don't not engage, and don't bring in your elite units. Don't go through sending in your 3 or 6 eels to try to handle Gotrek, because they've had that experience. You can't take him down. He's not as easy to kill as what it might seem. Like I've thrown I think I've thrown like witch elves at him, and I think I had about 70 attacks into him, and he survived with like 1 or 2 wounds at the end, and then like just healed up, right? So 20 buffed up witch elves weren't enough. I think 30, to your point, with a few extras is enough, right? So don't engage, keep it away. A couple of others, your boat placement changed. How has that impacted you much? Most of the time, Deepkin players just put boats in my deployment zone and just try to annoy me. I don't feel like you've ever really used it to your strengths. Like, have you found that's changed?
Yeah. I don't own any boats. That's how rubbish I think they are. I think they are the most pointless faction terrain scenery piece in the game.
I'll never forget one game where someone just put 2 boats in my deployment zone and just blocked me off and made me either go around it or have to like walk over. And like that is the most experience I've ever had with the boat. Other than that, it's just this useless piece that I don't think has ever done a mortal wound to me. Might have done an occasional ward save on a 6-up.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing people used them for, was they were super annoying and obnoxious. But they were great tactically to do that, because you make your opponent walk around them, you control them, and then later on in the game you can get the buffs to get your prayers and stuff off. But now that they have to be in your deployment zone, and because of the garrison rules, like meaning you can't go over them, you can deploy into them, but then if you want to leave them, you don't get to just like use your movement. You have to set up wholly within 6 of it. And Deepkin are too fast for that. You just don't want to get like hamstrung by only being able to move 6 inches from your boat turn 1. So honestly, the only purpose I see of a boat now is putting it at the back of your army if you're going to deploy like your Soul Scryer and stuff next to it to boost his prayer roll by 1. But it's really only going to be for the first turn when you're really just trying to roll a bless on a unit that doesn't really matter. And so honestly, I've just saved myself the money. I don't use them. I didn't use them in TTS. I don't think they're worth it. And honestly, I've got no issue with that. Not all armies have faction terrain. I don't think they need it. I basically just treat Deepkin as an army that doesn't have faction terrain, and it saves me transporting it to tournaments.
The only maybe positive that I could think about is having a bit of a distraction for someone to use their monstrous rampage. I mean, should they decide that they really want to destroy your boat as opposed to roar or stomp or their finest hour, not their finest hour, Titanic Jewel. I mean, but like again, on the pecking order of monstrous rampages, it's stomp, roar, and Titanic Jewel. Smash to rubble is so low. Yeah, if someone wants to smash it, good, go for it. Go smash it. I don't care, but it's not viable to my Deepkin strategy.
Nah, not at all. And it literally is only if somebody has 4 monsters and they're all in combat and one of them is by the boat because that's where it needed to be. And you're like, this isn't the one I need to use, one of the other 3. Sure, smash my boat. I don't care. But I honestly, I would just rather not take it. And so I don't own one. I'm not going to buy one.
Oh no, you smashed my boat. How no? What am my army going to do? Yeah. 2 more questions and I'll get to your list. The first one, and my man always in the chat asking the exact same question, is Sons. How are you going with Sons? Is a Kraken Eater a good choice to bring into your list to kick that objective to have 35 wounds of pain? Is it a viable option for Deepkin? Competitive Deepkin, that is. Obviously viable, anyone can put anything into that list.
I'll be honest, I've not really considered Bundo. I've looked at his scroll a few times. My general opinion on any of the allied Mega Gargants is their main strength is that they count it as 20 or 30 models on an objective. They don't do that if you take them in other factions. So do I want to spend that many points? Same argument with Gotrek. He impacts the list so much by spending all those points on something that's not Deepkin that fits your synergies. He is another monster, which I think 2 monsters is probably the sweet spot where I'm thinking in third that you want. And at the moment, I'm only running 1 Leviadon. I have a written list with 2, have considered it, but often it's at the cost of having no Ish Lane or less reavers or whatever, and it's a bit too minimal. So I'm still not sure if I would go 2 turtles, even though turtles are great. I think they are very good. I think the ability to have the Ish Lane is too big to give up, and so I just don't. Up. I don't know what I don't know what I would drop to take him, and I just don't know if his little tricks. I don't think Deepkin care about kicking their objective, like other than the one scenario that I reckon people will stop playing because it's basically an auto loss against Gargants. Other than going cool turn 1, I'm going to kick this so you can't score 4 points. I don't really think you care that much about kicking objectives a certain distance. And the fight last to be able to do some piling, maybe grab a model and break coherency. More and more the game's dropping down to coherency not really mattering, like especially the new Stormcast Dragon units of 2. You're not going to break them for a start anyway, and then you can't break their coherency because there's 2 of them. I don't think he's worth it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm looking at the first list I'm going to bring up of yours, Chris, and to bring in a Mega Gargan, I'm dropping either 9 Ishland Guard, I'm dropping a Turtle, I'm dropping an Eidolon plus something else, and what's better in my army? Some Ishland Guard, Leviadon, or a Mega Gargan? I think absolutely 9 out of 10. It's always going to be something native in your book. I don't know if you need that points kind of that big block of wounds. I don't think that's your weakness. So do it if you want to do it. Like it's a narrative, it's cool, it's fun, whatever. But competitively, I'd put a Gotrek in before I'd put in Bundo.
Yep.
And finally, the meta. How are you finding Archaon, Morathi, Gotrek, Be'lakor, Archaon? I think I've said Archaon twice now.
But how you twice.
I think I meant Be'lakor or Alariel or whoever. Insert generic gods here, Nagash here.
You could probably say Archaon 3 times for how much I consider him to be the meta issue right now. Morathi, I think, is fine. I think Deepkin would deal with Morathi absolutely fine. I think she would be scared because turn 1, if she charges me, my reavers will do. She'll take 3 wounds in my turn. She'll get stuck on 3+ unrendable eels. Probably won't kill them. So she'll take 3, then she'll take 3 in her turn, then she'll take 3, then she'll take 3. So I'm not concerned about Morathi in the slightest. Gotrek, I've already said, he's an issue. If you can line up your reavers against him and get them all in, if you curse him, he goes down and you don't need your whole squad. I've done that at the tournament at Toowoomba Open recently, where I decided to retreat and not shoot my reavers for a turn because he'd got into them and I needed to move across the board back to my Soul Scryer. And I wanted to make, even though it was going to make his charge, it wasn't far enough to get out of his charge because you can't run and retreat. I was like, I need to take these casualties and just not shoot this turn so that he gets in range of the Soul Scryer to have a chance. Did that at the time. I got curse off, and then I had 17 out of my 30 reavers, but 51 shots with curse did from 0 to 10. He would have taken 10 wounds if he had 10 wounds to take after his armor save and his 3+ ward. So that deals with him. Be'lakor, he's annoying. There's not a lot you can do about it other than, say, you can take things like the love. I played against Dave Kerr, Be'lakor, and Archaon in the same list. Was too much of a problem. It was the game I lost at that tournament. Be'lakor, I think, on his own, not an issue. You can deal with just not doing a thing for 1 turn. In that matchup, I think I would almost always do half of what I did, which is take the Soul Scryer and the Leviadon off the board. But I would leave the reavers on the board, and that's the mistake I made in that game. Is I didn't want him to Be'lakor the reavers, so I took them off the board as well. In hindsight, you leave the reavers on, and you just take the turtle off the board because it can still ambush on, make its charge, get in. Can't be Be'lakor. It still does its buffs. And then
its bubbles are passive, right? So even if it, you fail some of the charges, that's still quite a generous bubble, especially if you extend it from 12 to 15.
Yeah. Archaon is the big one, because especially now that the Slaves to Darkness Inch mark has been confirmed in the new White Dwarf, that it didn't change to get rid of the reroll ones. Even with the save stacking, he would have been okay. The army could have dealt with him. It can't deal with him with reroll ones and the save stacking. It could only do it if he was on his 3+ base save with his reroll ones. I think the army could take him down. But if he's got Mystic Shield on him, and then he's got like all out defense, best day ever, you're not
life form, like he's so durable.
You can't kill him. So in that scenario, you have to try and just pin him and then ignore it, because you can't ignore him, because he moves like 12-14 inches. He will get to you, and if he touches your reavers, he will blow them up. So you basically have to, and that's why I think the Ish lane is so crucial. You have to pin him with the Ish lane, because 3+ ignoring rend, you should be able to hold him for a while. Turns out not as long as I thought. If he's getting all reroll hits and wounds, like he can go through 2 units of Ish lane in basically a battle round if he charges, because you can't get better than a 3+ save. If you can somehow control it so that you are the person charging Archaon, then you get a 2+ unrendable save with Ish lane when you charge, and they will survive that round long enough to therefore pin him in the next battle round, and then hopefully you go again and you just rinse and repeat, and you're only needing to use 1 unit at a time, and they will survive. But if he comes into you, he will go through them, and so you always have to be careful of you can't let him double turn you and free himself up to then go into the rest of the army, because the rest of the army will fold to him. I wonder about the turtle's ability to hold him for a little bit, because he can't put a turtle in the sword because it's not a hero. But I still don't know. Like, I think if he's going twice, I think he'll do enough to make the turtle bracket the first time. And so
when you say twice, are you talking about Reapers of Vengeance, or are you talking about just getting a double turned? Yeah, okay.
No. Reapers or Chaos or a Chaos Lord. Yeah, in Slaves to Darkness, Chaos Lord is pretty common. You just run him up after Archaon, wholly within 12, and then he fights twice. So a turtle, I think Archaon would do enough to make the turtle take 9 wounds, which brackets it, which makes the turtle save go to a 3+. And so then once it's lost that point, he then goes again, and his rend is putting you to 5s, and I think the turtle would die. And if you lose the turtle, it's such a devastating loss on the army because of what it brings. It's +1 save, and it's +1 to hit, and it's your monstrous reaction, so it's your access to raw. It's one of the few things that does you mortal wounds. It's
battle tactics. You score battle tactics, and you give away a battle tactic when it dies as well. You lose. Well, sorry, you give away a victory point when it dies. So, and I think you made a good point as well. Like having 2 monsters in your list, then throw in a metamorphosis spell, and that can get you access to some additional victory points too. And yeah, it's an interesting one. Like with because the last couple of games I've played against Deepkin, when I pulled down Leviadon, you're right. That's when the army collapsed. That's when the sharks and the eels, and even just like even the reavers hiding in the back, kind of shooting over the Ishland guard. That's when it all collapses. The minute I can get rid of that turtle, and that was ironic because it was actually Deadly Terrain who actually saved my bacon a few times. Well, actually, the last game I played, Suns. Now we haven't talked about Suns in the meta, because then I'm going to move to your list. How have you found Suns with Deepkin? And do you have any strategies on handling Suns? Because you don't have the model count, you don't have the monster count, you don't have the wounds. Like you just like, how do you handle them?
I think Suns are okay as long as you're not playing like Border War.
Take a tribe.
As long as you're not playing in the scenario that's 1, 2, 4, because honestly, I think that mission is 99% of the time the Mega Gargants auto win against almost any army.
Let's put that one to the side. Let's just go the average.
In terms of taking them down and killing the army, Deepkin 100% can do it. And the issue is Mega Gargants have 4+ base saves. Deepkin with the reavers and to be honest, Ishlane and stuff like that, any army that has a 4+ base save, any model unit that's 4+ or worse, Deepkin deals with no problem whatsoever. Reavers, weight of dice, people don't realize it, but when you just do all these attacks and they're like, oh, I've got a 3+ save, and you're like, yeah, but here's 30 save rolls. Like, you're going to take 10 wounds from that at least. And they don't really see it, but it's like, yeah, this unit of 20, 30 dudes is going to make you take that many save rolls, that you're going to take a shed load of wounds. And so that's why them starting on a 4+ or worse is so critical, because even if they had +3, all your Reaver attacks and Ishlane attacks, you're not throwing any rend at them anyway. So the best they can get is +1. And so every 1 and every 2 they roll is damaging to them. And so that's why any army that rerolls 1s to save or reroll saves is an issue, because a lot of the damage output does come from weight of dice from the Reavers. But the turtle as well can get stuck in. It's got rend 1 and 2. If it rolls 6s to hit on its bites, it's 3 mortal wounds, flat 6 against monsters. So if the turtle goes in, I have done that. I charged a Mega Gargant, rolled boxcars, and just did 12 mortal wounds off the bite. And then
Terrorgeist numbers.
A couple of I have also been Terrorgeisted where they rolled 3 6s into me and took my turtle off. But into a Mega Gargant, you can kill them. I turn 1 with 30 Reavers, 10 Thralls, and a turtle. I killed a Man Crusher and a War Stomper from full to dead in 1 turn. And so killing them isn't an issue. And so generally because of that, I think you can then win the missions later on, because they want to come to you and all they're going to do is stand there. They don't really do a great job at killing eels. So eels are great at pinning them.
I've thrown a lot of attacks. Like, I know when I've gone up against the Ishlane Guard, you've got to throw so many dice with my Mega Gargants, and it's actually the Man Crushers that would do all the damage, because they've got, like, each of them has like 10 attacks with their club, and you're just throwing pure weight of dice, because everything is based on rend. And if you safe that that club attack or the headbutt, it's like 4 damage. It's 3 damage. So when you start removing the rend, and they've got rend 2, rend 3, you grind me down. And I guess if you can block me off from the objective, that just stops me from scoring, which means, and if you stop me from charging, there's a lot of cool things you can do. It's just like, don't play to their game. And if you take the Man Crushers, kill the Man Crushers.
Yeah. So yeah, I think Gargants are super strong at the moment, and a lot of armies are struggling with them. And so I think Deepkin are actually in a pretty good spot against them. I think they're one of the armies that deals with them. Certainly the lists that I'm writing and playing. And to be fair, like, I genuinely don't think I'm like doing anything crazy here or reinventing the wheel massively with these lists. I think most people you would see, they would build towards these cores. I think almost every list will take a Soul Scryer, an Eidolon, a Turtle, and at least 3 Guard. And then you play around with the rest of it in terms of how you want your list to be, which is basically what I've got with these 2 lists, is pretty much one of the 2 directions I think you'll go. But yeah, Gargants is generally a good matchup. It's just that one scenario is awful. But I don't think it's because Deepkin specifically struggle with it. I think almost any army in the game, you just can't win that matchup. So it's not really worth stressing about. If it happens, okay, it happens.
And you might find tournament organizers don't run that scenario when they're everything kind of settles.
Yeah, I think the big change would just be you just say that they can't kick the home objective. And that's it. You just in that mission you make, like, because those 2 are primary, so they can't be burned, and you just basically say a primary objective can't be kicked by the Kraken Eater, and I think that would solve a lot of the issues.
Yeah, it's an interesting change, because you obviously can't remove a primary objective, in turn 3. So I brought up you 2 lists. The first one, and Jonathan has asked an interesting question that we can kind of almost answer, as we're talking. He talked about, the enclaves and, where you think the enclaves kind of stand. And what's cool is the 2 lists that you've given me are 2 different enclaves. The first one being Domhain. The other one, was it Futharn?
Futharn, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So you've gotten, like, do you think do you reckon enclaves, there's a couple of good ones, a couple of hot garbage ones, they're all got a place? Like, where do you think the enclaves kind of stand?
I've always thought Futharn was the best from the beginning. Generally, most people seem to go towards Domhain. It's really funny. I was writing all these Futhan lists, and then I started writing Domhain. And at the tournament I went to, I actually decided to take Domhain instead of Futhan, for a few reasons. Domhain, I kind of just took a gamble on that people would be leaning into monster meta, because obviously the Domhain benefit is you get to reroll all wound rolls against monsters. But it also just kind of fit with the build I was trying to go for that. But I think Futhan is still the best one. But I think Futhan and Domhain are very similar in how they will play. They both give you access to reroll ones to hit, and certain units getting rerolls either of 1 or rerolls to wound, which is really what you're looking for.
Reroll to wound is massive. Any buff to wound, let alone a reroll to wound, and it's not just reroll ones; it's reroll fail wound rolls, which is nasty. But the list that you've given me, the first one, for anyone who can't see, you've gone Domhain, you've gone Predator's Domain, which is a fascinating one. I'll want to know why you've done that in a minute. But you've got a Volturnus as opposed to your generic king. You've got your Soul Scryer. You've got Eidolon and Mathland. Good to see the aspect of the Storm, flaming weapon through the Arcane Tome. You've also got 4 units of Ishlan Guard. You've got 1 unit of Reavers that's been reinforced, and you've got the Turtle all wrapped up in a battle regiment for 1 drop. And you've kind of already talked a little bit about why you'd want to go 1 drop, just to be able to choose, obviously to determine, how you start. But why have you done this? Like, talk to me even like from Predator's Domain and, the combination of the flaming weapon through the tome. Like, talk to me about some of these decisions.
So Predator's Domain is the one I've basically just decided I'm taking in pretty much in every Deepkin list I write. This list, I might consider taking the battle line one. Keep a battle line unit alive.
Hold the line.
Hold the line. The reason I didn't, though, is I still would be hesitant to, is because of how the army plays. The Ishlan are literally your screens. You are throwing them in. You are never keeping them back. You need them to be doing the work of constantly going in, pinning monsters, pinning units, getting shot. And so I expect them to die. And I don't care when they die. I'm like, you're doing your job. As long as my other stuff isn't dying and you're living long enough for me to do what I need to do. But I expect my Ishlan to die in every game. And so I wouldn't take Hold the Line. Whereas Predator's Domain is basically, you get this if you control more terrain pieces by the end of the game. So the army's super quick. So generally I was finding at the start that, especially with like the Futhan Flip Tides build, the alpha potential is so strong that the games I was playing, I was like basically tabling my opponent by turn 2. So it's like, well, I'm definitely, if I'm tabling, going to control more scenery pieces than my opponent. So then there's no requirements for me to be like, I have to keep this guy alive, I have to kill their general, I have to not. It's just, if I'm tabling, I win. But also if I'm not tabling, most of the time, they're not going to have many units left. And I'm not going to, and I generally will have controlled all the stuff at my back, and then the army pushes into them and so starts taking them off. And because of the fact that you get run and charge and retreat and charge, you, like, if you needed to just cross the board and go like, oh, I need to go get that objective back late game, you just like fly some eels 20 inches and just tow it, and you're like, cool, I've got my grand strategy back again. And so I found that I don't think I've really, unless I've literally, like, I've been tabled and the game's gone horrifically, I have always scored my grand strategy with Predator's Domain. It's just how it just works with how the army plays.
Yeah,
it's a little bit of, it seems like, I wonder if people have been put off selecting that because it feels like a bit too much bookkeeping to keep track of who controls the objectives. But it's really not hard, unless you played against an army that also was like, that was continuous.
I was gonna say, like, you don't have, like, there's not a lot of competitors to you that can do what you do. Like, everyone has a lot of teleports, or 1 or 2 units can backboard, but to have the full speed, other than like, a full Skyfire build, or there's a couple of particular builds that could be really fast and flying.
Yeah,
no one can really match you, especially with your run and charge stuff, or being able to re-roll. Like, it's just, you're too good.
I think new Stormcast Drake builds that are coming in might make me need to rethink this. I still don't know if I rethink based on one army.
There's probably not enough bodies. Like the only problem is there's just not a lot of models.
Yeah, I think
but they're durable.
It's just the fact that all they have to do is fly over, touch it at one point, and then move on, and then you've got to go back and get it. And the army, you only really can go back and get stuff if you've killed your opponent, which most of the time you've killed them by turn 4 or turn 5, and so you can go back and get them. I don't know if you'll do that against the new Stormcast in terms of actually killing them, which is where that comment comes from. But I still don't think I would change it, and I still think it's the one I'd be playing for. But yeah, and then in terms of the Arcane Tome, Flaming Weapon, Arcane Tome is just the artifact I'm always taking on that Eidolon now. Gives me a wizard, but I take Flaming Weapon because I have to select a spell. Most of the time I'm using him to cast Mystic Shield. And most of the time it's on himself, just to get him to a 2+ save, so that the Leviadon is on a 2+ naturally, puts the Eidolon on a 2+. Like, save stacking is a thing in this edition, so I want to be able to cast a Mystic Shield, because I've got, like, so making him a caster, that spell has just gone up in value so much because of rend increasing, that unless I'm going to go in and there's a turn where I'm like, okay, his job is that he has to go kill that thing, and so it shouldn't matter about him surviving, that's the time I might decide to cast Flaming Weapon. But 90% of the time he's just casting Mystic Shield.
It's probably good to know, especially if you got like a battle tactic, or your opponent. Yeah, like if you've got a situation where your opponent's going for your Eidolon, or you find yourself in a position where you're going to pull down, like slay the Warlord or wherever it might be. At least you've got a tool to get more damage from that Eidolon.
Yeah,
but it's not like some mad strategy to that's your silver bullet.
Yeah. No, I have used it, and sometimes that extra bit of damage helps. But yeah, it's a nice tool to have. Like I say, there's nothing in the army revolving around it going off, but it also lets him cast Mystic Shield, so it's just a nice bit of flexibility.
See, most people would know what a Ishland Guard does, right? They know it's the defensive eels. They know it ignores rend. You can get the +1 armor save, and there's all this good stuff. So I'm not going to ask you like what you've done here. I might ask you just maybe 2 whys, or maybe 1 why and 1 how. The why would be, why have you gone units of 3 as opposed to reinforcing into units of 6? And then the how would be, how do you use the 4 units?
Why, and that literally with Cruel Boys just coming out, if I wrote this list again now, I potentially would merge 2 of those 3s into a 6, just because they've come out with a rule that is so specific. It's completely unique in terms of which is the vanishing act, disappearing act, or whatever it's called, where they can literally make you remove units from the table from deployment, and then you have to put them on in your first movement phase. And given the role of Ishland Guard is they sit on your front line, they screen your army, they absorb all enemy shooting, because obviously Deepkin's huge thing that we actually haven't talked about, that they have always had since the start of them being an army, is if an enemy wants to shoot a Deepkin unit, they have to shoot the closest unit. Like, they don't get to choose, oh, I'm in range, I'm going to shoot that here at the back. It's like, no, you're going to shoot this unit right here. These are 3+ saves, ignoring rend. Like, that's their job. Okay. And then once they go in and they charge, the great thing about them and their interplay with third is, although they are, yes, a 4+ base save, they can actually get to a 2+ save and saving on 2s, because they have a rule that when they charge, their save characteristic changes to a 3. They don't get +1 save. So when they charge, they become a 3+ save. And so then if they're within range of your turtle, they're getting +1. Or if you put Mystic Shield on them, or if you go all out defense, they then become a 2+ save, and it's ignoring rend. And so they go in, units that unleash hell against you, as long as they don't do like loads of mortals, but even if they do, so be it. Units that unleash hell against you, Iron Drakes, like Ishlane laugh at them, because they go, oh, I'm going to unleash 60 shots at rend 2, and you're like, cool, I've got 2+ ignoring rend saves. You're not going to do anything. You might kill 1 eel, maybe, if you get lucky. And then you're stuck in combat with me, and they are the closest unit. You can't pin them. So if people, because the amazing thing that I've done to a few people I've been explaining recently is that you obviously don't have to unleash hell. Like, people are doing the whole thing where they have a unit just within 9, So it's not the thing getting charged, so they can selectively choose what unit they want to shoot at. It doesn't work because you still charge the Ishlane in. They go, I'm not going to shoot them because you haven't tagged me, so I'm still free to shoot. And I go, okay, I charge something else in to the side
but
or
you're
off some.
still the closest.
The Ishlane I've already charged is still the closest. So now they're like, I'm going to shoot. And I'm like, you can't because the Ishlane are closer. It's not restricted to just the shooting phase. It's anytime someone wants to target them with a shooting attack. And so they're just incredible for the interplay with the game because so many people are changing their lists to revolve around, oh, but if I get charged, I'll just unleash hell. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work against Deepkin if they've got Ishlane. Unless Warp Lightning Cannons can just go boom, roll a 1 and do 12 mortal wounds and kill them.
Of course, like the Hurricanum does, mortal wounds, but like majority of them have a hit and wound roll, but unfortunately, yeah.
But the whole point is that you also don't care that the Ishlane die. Their job is literally just to absorb the stand and shoot. And because you can only unleash hell once, they do their job. Even if that Warp Lightning Cannon takes the whole unit off in one go, the Ishlane have still done their job. As long as because you're always counter-charging. You're never just charging one thing in. You're charging them in, then you're charging in the Turtle and the Eidolon and all these other things with it. And so they're just phenomenal into shooting armies. And they always have been. And so they are even more because I think the interesting thing with third and the monster meta is everyone was like monsters. And there are some that are still incredible. But a lot of the, I think, strong meta, like edging towards the 4150 lists that are coming out are actually not monster heavy, and they've got lots of big blocks of shooting units. And I think Cruel Boys are going to do that. You're going to start seeing double nines, potentially double unleashing hell with all the Bolt Boys. And then you've got, like say, Iron Drakes. They love it, other than against Deepkin that ignore their
They just don't have the mortals. Yeah, like it's the Cruel Boys do the mortals,
but like Sentinels and stuff like that. They do mortals, but again, it doesn't matter if you get one model in. You can normally pin them and then they're stuck anyway. But I think you are going to see, you're either going to see monster heavy or you're going to see loads of shooting. And so I think Deepkin are really good into that shooting meta. They always have been, they always will be. And I think third is just going to keep leaning into that, which is why I do think Deepkin is still good. But it's why I also think Morsar have just gone down the drain, because Morsar are a 4-up save. They don't ignore rend. If they try and charge something, they are dead. Like from an Unleash Hell, like not worth it.
You've actually just reminded me, Lumineth as well, right? You've got the, big blocks of Sentinels, even like, some lists are running around with Foxies. Do you think the Ishlane Guard as well have been really helpful to, soak up that? Because obviously, the Sentinels want to shoot off that Soul Scry if they have a chance. They want to take out that Tidecaster. But Eels would soak that up so well.
The Mortals is a problem, especially as like the builds.
Well, they wouldn't do enough, would they? Like
the builds we've seen, they do. So I played the tournament I played against an Iliatha build, which I think is amazing in third, with the interplay with command points and CP now. It's so good. And so he had 2 blocks of 20 Sentinels, and was a 1-drop, got control of the turn. And so both of those units cast their spells, so they're doing mortals on 5s. And then because it's Iliatha, both units get to stand and shoot. And so he's getting 38 shots, 5 doing mortals. He just kills a whole unit of Eels in one go, which was the issue. I was like, well, I have to charge you because otherwise you're just going to shoot them off anyway. And then I need to pin you. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go in with the Eels. Then I'll also, who died, then I'll go in with the Eidolon and then get him close enough to pin you. Then I can go in with the Turtle as well. And it was just like, okay, I'm just going to throw everything I can at you. And you can only shoot off one thing. And so even if they die to mortals, okay, like they're not the thing doing the damage. And they just basically help you really, really control the lists that don't have mortals. Like City's Iron Drake's list, I don't think they have a chance against Deepkin with the Eels. But the lists that have mortals, you're losing your units quicker. So when you hit them, you have to make it count more. But they still give you that ability. It's just a cheap trading unit. Like, don't get me wrong, you could do the same thing with like Ether Wings for way less points that will die. But the problem there is that they don't then charge block, like the whole thing I explained before. If you're sitting outside of 9, if you try and do that with Ether Wings, then when you charge your Eidolon or you charge your Turtle, they can still shoot that because it's not.
It's just that you're blocking with 600 points essentially, but with the 4 units of Ishlan, that's a lot of points. You're defending your Turtle, you're defending your Eidolon, you're defending those reavers. Because I think, you know, for anyone who's just joining us late, the reavers are just putting out a whole bunch of damage. And to be honest with you, most players, unless you're smart and you know what you're coming across, most people would ignore the reavers. Like, you rarely saw them on the table, so you'd go Eels, Turtle, Eidolon.
Yeah, I think the issue is like,
and then it's too late.
I've talked them up a bit too much. Everyone knows they're a threat, but it kind of doesn't matter too much because you can't target them with shooting because I'm not letting you with how I'm literally just putting my army on the table. So even though my opponent wants to get to them, I'm like, well, you can't shoot them. And then you get to control your opponent's movement with your own models in terms of placement. So it's not, your opponent normally just can't do anything about the reavers until they've got through the eels and the turtle and the eidolon, because you throw them at them. Like, you throw the eels at them, you throw the eidolon at them, and then maybe you also throw the turtle in, but you don't want the turtle to die, so you don't chuck him straight in. But you kind of like, I'm not going to let you get to these reavers until you go through everything else, because the reavers die to nothing, and then that you lose so much output, you lose your bodies, you lose all this ability to project power as well, because it's your range. But the issue is if you come up against Tzeentch and their casters are still alive, and magic, it's mortal wounds and abilities that aren't shooting. If your reavers get into range of that, or the Leviadon, that's what hurts Deepkin. And they're the sorts of things where you can suddenly be on the back foot. Like, I played a game against Ash McEwen on TTS, and he summoned a Lord of Change, and then literally cast 2 spells. He cast Gateway, and he cast
Bolt of Tzeentch or something.
Pink Storm, and he did 16 mortal wounds to my turtle, and took it off. And you're like, I couldn't do anything about that. I wish they had to use magic on the closest unit as well, but that would probably be a bit too.
Then you just be unbeatable.
But yeah, ranged mortals that isn't a shooting attack is the issue, and that's why I'm not sure about the Stormcast Dragons yet, because that's still a shooting attack. It's ranged mortals, but it's still a shooting attack, so you can still control where they can put them. So I don't know yet. Obviously, I haven't played that matchup, but it's one I'm looking forward to playing, because I think you're going to see a hell of a lot of dragons on the table. So,
yeah, especially like the storm. When I was reading the battle tome initially, I was thinking, right, people are going to take 1 big dragon, maybe even 2 big dragons. Now you want to see the storm guard. You're going to see offensive eels in Stormcast essentially, but 9 wounds, 3 up armor save, mortal. They have more mortal wounds than your shock. So. In the mirror, I think you're going to lose in that one.
Yeah, I think the list, like looking at it really quickly for me, I think would be like a Star Drake, a Knight Hero, and then like 8 of the dragons. I think that's a 2K list, and I think you'll see similar to that. I think just the Star Drake as an option, because I think the Rain of Stars shooting attack is super good. But yeah, getting back to Deepkin,
I was going to bring you around. I was going to say, because Jonathan's asked, like, do thralls have a place? Yeah, we kind of talked about thralls already. They're okay. Certainly, big blocks of thralls are still out of the question until they get a rewrite of either smaller base sizes, which are never going to happen, or range 2. You probably take your thralls at units of 10 at most. You're not going to reinforce them unless you're building in for redundancy and to make sure you get as many attacks in as possible.
There's one list that I do still want to try with thralls in a 30, and it's taking a different enclave, which is the Morphan enclave, which I don't think I've ever seen competitively.
I don't think I've ever. No one's ever. That's like Null Myriad for Ossiarch Bone Reapers. No one's ever taken Morphan.
So that one, basically, Deep can have a unit which you also never see, Soul Render, who's a hero that basically has an ability in your Battle Shock phase, and you pick a Namati unit, basically holier than 12, and you add D3 models, like slain models, back into that unit. But Morphan Enclave, whenever a Soul Render uses that ability, you add 3 to the dice roll. Yeah. And so they're like 90 points for a soul render. They're super cheap. So, and I've got 3 of them because I've got 3 start collecting boxes. So you take 3 soul renders, and you're getting 9 plus 3d3. So minimum you're bringing back 12 models, maximum you're bringing back 18. And so I think there's potentially, you could build like a castle that is turtle, 30 thralls in like a big semicircle around it, like literally using that 15-inch aura from the turtle, with reavers behind that, and then all your heroes wholly within 12 of that bubble. And you just push up. And if you lose, because that way you can use all-out defense on the thralls. You're getting cover turn 1, you're in range of your turtle, so you've got +2 to save, +3 to save. So you can basically ignore Rend 2 and be on a 4+ save. And then you can obviously just use Inspiring Presence. And if they kill 29 guys, you put back at least 12. And so you go from having like nothing to half your unit back. And I think, and you've still got all the reavers behind. I think that list could work. And thralls hit like a truck. They are great. Like in terms of killing mega gargants, thralls do 10 thralls is amazing. Like it's 21 attacks that in most lists get 2s rerolling 1s by 2s with rend and damage 2 against anything with 4 or more wounds. And so, like I say, with rend against a mega, even if they give it +1 save, they're back to their 4 up. They fail half of them. 21 attacks, 2s rerolling 1s by 2s. You're getting like 18 through. So if they fail 9 armor saves, which they should on 4+, they're taking 18 damage. Like it's half a mega gargant from 10 thralls.
And they're not going to have the wizard. You're not going to have the magic to bring them back. Like, you know, they can do a heal. And to be honest, their bravery as well is rubbish. So they're probably only 50% of the chance going to bring back D3 wounds anyway. So you pull it down in 2 turns or 2 combats.
Yeah. And thralls, obviously Deepkin, you get to strike first in High Tide, which in this list, Futhan Flip Tides would be in the 2nd battle round, which could be really good. Otherwise, normally in the 3rd battle round. So, like, if people charge you and those thralls get to hit first, I think it's just you could make them more survivable than people think. You need 30 wounds to have the wound sink to do it. But I don't know if there's a lot in the game that can blow through 30 wounds that's on a 4-up ignoring Rend 2. So, I think it could work. I genuinely do think it could work. And you can still get a decent amount of stuff in the list around it. But that's a list, I guess, for another time. But this,
I think the challenge is that when you're putting in, you know, the points. I don't know the price of what a unit of thrall is, but if you're going to double reinforce it to a unit of 30, again, are you better just having eels? And I think traditionally the answer has always just been the eels answer. But who knows? Maybe if you're in the comments and you're listening and you are using 30 thralls, let us know and tell us how you're making the most. But I haven't seen them on the table. I've seen 20 at most, but most people would just rather put in blocks of 10 and have multiple units of 10 as opposed to a block of 30. But this list is obviously changed Enclave. You've gone Futhan. You have kept some consistency. You are Battle Regiment still. You've still got your Eidolon Storm with the tome and the flaming weapon. You've got Tidecaster though with Master of Magic. You've got 2 units of reavers instead of the 1. You've got your thralls. You've gone a reinforced unit of Ishlan, and you've still got the turtle. So differences. Why would you go this one over the last list? And what are you trying to achieve with this one that the last one couldn't?
So this one is, I think, the better one, and I think it's getting to as competitive as I think they can be. The reason for the 6 guard, like I say, it's double. It's got 2 reasons. One is to make it a 1-drop, because if they were 3s, you would have 6 units in that battle regiment, so you would have to be a 2-drop.
Yeah.
The second is now the 1-drop is preferable. 2, because of Cruel Boys, they can't take that screen off the table if it's reinforced. And so I think it's super important because you want them on the front line. You don't want them to just be able to take the screen off, then go first, then shoot your juicy stuff behind it with their crossbows. So that's the reason for that. The Tidecaster is in this list, Futhan, as the general, because you're flipping the tides. And so this is Enclave specific thing. Well, it's not. It's a Tidecaster specific thing. They have to be the general for you to do this. But what it lets you do is it basically changes the order of the Deepkin allegiance abilities. So instead of getting cover, run and charge, run and shoot, fight first, retreat and charge, retreat and shoot, cover, it basically, you start on run and charge, run and shoot, then you fight first, then you go to retreat and charge, retreat and shoot, then you go to cover, then you go back to run and charge. But then Futhan Enclave combines with that, so whenever you would be affected by the retreat and charge, you get affected by the run and charge, run and shoot. So you lose the ability to ever retreat and charge, retreat and shoot, but you get 3 battle rounds of run and charge, run and shoot. And whenever you get that, you're also re-rolling ones for everything in the army.
And so you've extended the re-roll piece.
Yeah, and it's shooting and combat, which is why it's so important for the reavers. So turn 1, you can run and shoot, and you're re-rolling ones to hit. You can run and charge, you're re-rolling ones to hit. And then straight away you're going to turn 2, and your whole army fights first. You're losing the re-roll ones, but your whole army's fighting first. And then turn 3, you're back to run and charge, run and shoot, re-rolling ones again. And
then you've got the re-roll ones to wound in combat too.
For the mounts, yeah. And so so the mount attacks, and this is it's like I say, both Domhain and Futhan give you reroll ones to hit, reroll ones, or reroll wounds, but differently. And so the Leviadon is the big thing that you want to be rerolling. And so the reason I think Futhan is better is because in 3 out of 5 battle rounds, you're getting to reroll ones to hit on it, and it's got a decent shooting attack. 8 shots at 24-inch range, 3s and 3s with rend. Like, it's good. It can plink off heroes or nearly kill them, and then it goes in. Both its profiles hit on 2s, and then one of them wounds on 2s, one of them wounds on 3s, but the Eidolon's usually in range. So basically, both its profiles are 2s and 2s. It's rerolling ones to hit on the first round when it's running and shooting, running and charging. And then mounts in Futhan always reroll ones to wound, and it's against anything, which is why I think it's you don't get it on the shooting attacks, but it's why I think it's better than Domhain, because you get to reroll all wounds, which means it affects the shooting and stuff like that, which is nice, but it's only for Achillean units and it's only against monsters in Domhain, whereas Futhan is just mounts, reroll ones to wound. And so because your Leviadon is 2s to wound, it's rerolling ones. So it goes in with all its powerful attacks that are 2s rerolling ones, 2s rerolling ones. So the consistency is just you can't get better than that. And the amazing thing is, because it hits on 2s and it wounds on 2s, and you can give yourself +1 to hit, and the Eidolon gives it +1 to wound, even if you come up against someone that's trying to debuff you. So I played Simon, he put out a block of 30 dryads and was like, you're -1 to hit these dryads, and I've cast a -1 to wound spell. And I was like, great, I'm still 2s and 2s rerolling ones. And I just blew through them. And it's super consistent. It gives the Ishlane, again, the reroll ones to wound on their eel attacks. It makes the army a little bit slower to play with the Ishlane because they've got 3 attack profiles, and annoyingly in the Futhan you have to roll all 3 profiles separately because they all get different buffs. Like the riders don't get to reroll the ones to wound, so you have to do them separately to the eel attacks, but then the tail attacks are damage 1 and the bite attack is damage D3, so you have to do 3 sets.
Yeah, I've done. It's like playing with Gargants. I've got it's numbers everywhere. I think what's really cool with Futhan as well is you can go down the Alapex route as well because they've got that keyword of Achillean. So if you wanted to, and it's probably one thing that has been glaringly missing from your lists, and I still think it's worth including in a list, is the Alapexes. I think they're still really good. The War Scroll rewrite in 3rd edition, Broken Realms of Marathi, makes them good still. Maybe not in your build and what you're trying to achieve, but they synergize well.
Yeah, the initial list I wrote had a shark in. The very first one I wrote and played competitively, that was still a super strong list, had a shark in. And I played it for a bit, and it was just the thing that wasn't amazing, and it was basically the only flex in the list. It was take that out, and I had an endless spell, because you saw the first list was 1960, so it's going for a triumph. That list is 2000 on the nose, but there was some list where it's like, maybe I don't take all the Ishlane, or you drop the Shark out, and then you can put something else in, put the Emerald Life Swarm in, because Life Swarm is fantastic for Deepkin if you're taking those big blocks of reavers. But more importantly, honestly, I think the Turtle, because it has a 2+ save with 16 wounds, but it doesn't have an after save, and it hates more wounds. And you just want to, and it's not hero, so it can't use heroic recovery. You can't heal it. Someone, I think in the chat a while ago, said that you could take a priest with the healing prayer, which is cool, but I would never do that, because you only ever really have one priest in the list, which is Soul Scryer, and you're always taking curse, because it's just by far and away the best option, because the army it doesn't have much mortal wound output, and curse is basically your only access to mortal wounds to deal with the stuff that's got like 2+ rerolling 1's armor saves. You need mortal wound output, so you just have to have curse in the list, in my opinion.
It's hard to pull off though. I'm still struggling to find a good consistent way to get curse off. And I think you called it out earlier, you know, if you get double turned, or if someone takes the turn and then you're able to get in, different story. But I'm trying to do it in my Deepkin. I'm trying to do it in my daughter's army and try using it offensively. And what I really need is like a Balewind Vortex, but for priests. Like, that's what I really need. Like, extend that range 6 inches, and happy days, I've got curse. But it's super situational. It doesn't work the way you think it's initially going to work. You just finding the unit that you want to curse within 9 is quite a challenge.
Yeah. See, now that is the thing I think they could have done to do something super unique and awesome with the Deepkin terrain pieces, because they're called etheric vortex terrain features, and they buff like your prayers and your priests. That is inbuilt into them. I think if the terrain piece increased your range, or gave you bonuses to your prayer rolls for priests now, instead of just the rituals, that would be awesome. And there would be like an amazing reason to take those boats. Like, if they increased your range, or you could do the prayers and target units next to boats, like channeling it through the ether sea, that would be an awesome opportunity for them to do something really cool with that terrain feature, which would be a really nice bonus.
Like, you can't even use Spell Portal. Like, Spell Portal can't extend the range. Balewind, when it used to be around, couldn't extend the range. Like, there's literally no way to extend that 9 inch. And I think the challenge as well is all your priests are quite slow. Like, you don't have any super fast, durable priests. And I think it works in some other armies. Certainly the ones that I'm playing with are struggling to get the consistency of curse. But it's nice to have. It's definitely a good threat.
I think Deepkin are one of the armies where the curse is one of the easier ones to keep alive, because of the anti-shooting. It's just certain lists that like have the 18-inch range mortal wounds, or whatever. If they're smart, they go, I'm going to kill that Soul Scryer if you put him in range. But most of the time, he's probably not within 18. And what you're generally trying to do with these castle builds is actually you want to kind of stay back, make people charge you. You're unleashing hell with your reavers, but you're also setting your Soul Scryer up, so anything that charges you is coming within 9. And so that was the issue with the Archaon matchup. It didn't work against Archaon, because he made you reroll 6s. Now I think it would work against Archaon, because he doesn't make you reroll 6s. So in that matchup, my Soul Scryer was off the table, so I didn't have the whole, you came into me, now I can curse you, because I knew there was no point cursing him, because I'd reroll my 6s. So there was no point in that matchup. But in other people, I've done it. I literally did it against Cruel Boys the other day, put my Eidolon in front of my Soul Scryer, ran forward onto Mystical Terrain with the Soul Scryer, because Mystical Terrain is your friend for getting curse off, because it gives you +1 to pray. So I ran forward, dumped the Eidolon in front of him, left a gap accidentally between 2 units of eels for the crocodile to charge straight through. So he took it, charged my Eidolon, killed my Eidolon, which, don't get me wrong, it hurts, but then was sitting within 9 inches of my priest and hadn't touched my turtle and my reavers. I got my hero phase, cursed him, and then I shot him off. And I probably wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. And so that's kind of how I've been finding the army plays. You want them to come into you. You've got your bubbles. You don't care if you lose some eels. Sometimes you sacrifice the Eidolon. It does hurt, but if it means you get curse off on a key target, then that's what you do. Like I say, it's what you do against Gotrek. You let him charge you, and then you shoot him anyway. Then you try and curse him, and then you take him out. But
And by the way, for anyone's listening, the Archaon story, the game, was happening pre-FAQ, so that re-rolling sixes is clearly changed. So that will now work in your favor should you try to do that. But just as a reference. But Sebastian, we've already kind of mentioned about Gotrek. There's some interesting builds. There's a lot of trade-offs in Deepkin. If you wanted to do it in Deepkin, you said the best one was
Iron
Rack for the ability to give your allies the ability to use your tide, so be able to run and things like that. But otherwise, it is a big point sink, and players are getting smarter of how to get around and avoid Gotrek.
Yeah, and it makes
still viable.
It makes the rest of the list worse as well doing that. And like I say, the consistency is on that Leviadon in particular is so important. I've had the games where I've not had the rerolls to hit and the rerolls to wound, and you're rolling 2 and 4 dice every single time you see a 1 and you can't reroll it. It hurts so much. And it's actually the thing that the Eidolon is the one piece in the army that doesn't work. It doesn't get the reroll 1s because its big attacks aren't mounts, so it doesn't work in Futhan. And it's not Archelion, so it doesn't work in Domhain. And the Eidolon, I swear to God, I roll so many 1s to wound with that thing. It whiffs. It is the thing in the army that whiffs more than anything else.
I think when I played Ben Spinetti, when I played Ben Spinetti last with his Eidolon, it was a massive whiff, and I was playing Gits, and I just laughed because I think it whiffed, and I had nets as well, so it was like a double whiff. But I don't remember it being a weapon powerhouse, which is probably why I asked you why you put Flaming Weapon with an Arcane Tome. But really, it's a nice to have. But you've mentioned Mystic Shield is certainly the better one, because I just haven't found that aspect of the Storm as a big combat threat that you'd assume maybe it would be.
No, it's really not. The job I see him filling in terms of killing is just killing off chaff, whatever units. He's there to just be an 18-inch plus to wound aura and to issue some command abilities, potentially to the Leviadon. But then the thing he's great at is going and just hunting. Like in the Zinch matchup, unless they're playing Duplicitous, he's the thing that keeps them honest. And they're like, oh, I've used all my screens to take your charge. Now I haven't got any of my heroes behind, because he just retreats and charges. And any hero that's got 8 or less wounds within 3 at the start of the combat phase, he can give himself +1 to hit against them naturally. And so he goes in and he's like 2s and 2s, 5 attacks, rend 2, damage 3, retreating and charge. He will kill those wizards and those heroes, and that's his job, is going and killing those support foot characters behind the lines and still giving his +1 to wound aura. So that's what you want to use him for. Turn 1, your initial charge, you're never getting into them, and he just sits in there, goes into stuff that he can deal with, like kill off a chaff unit or something, to give the auras and get him close. And then turn 2, turn 3, it's the right, now I'm going to come after you, unless you've got something that can deal with him. But otherwise he just dies. If you put him into stuff that you're like, oh, I need to kill this, he doesn't, and then he dies, and then your army loses a lot of power, because you lose +1 to wound to shoot on your reavers, you lose +1 to wound for everything in combat. Like, it's big.
Maybe some last questions, and we'll kind of bring it home. First one, the real question. I think this is probably one of my favorite questions I've ever been asked, at least in a Deepkin show, if not this year, is, are they mer elves or are they melfs? Melfs. I like that word.
Melfs.
You're a melf. Yeah, I was
Melfs.
Mouths?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mouths.
They probably
would
would
go
be
with that one.
Mer elves, but I still just like the Ben Stiller. I still just like the Ben Stiller thing. Merman.
Oh, I love that movie. Yeah. Do you think there's any good ally choices? Like, and you know, Jonathan, you need to rewatch the show. We talked about sharks. Sharks are good. They I think they're still viable. I think in the what Chris is trying to achieve, maybe not so much. But if I was building a list from the ground up, definitely worth considering. I wouldn't not put them on the table. I think maybe a couple of things that I wouldn't put on the table right now is still poor old Lotan, little old squid. Oh, you think some magic with Squid Man?
Reroll ones to hit. Reroll ones to hit in a 12-inch bubble on Namati. He's what goes in the Morphan list. because you don't get rerolls otherwise. You stick Lotan
If nobody's running, we're not running Mothan.
I'm going to do it.
No one's doing it. All right.
I'm going to run it.
Prove us. All right. Take
All
it
right,
the
I'm
next
gonna
GT. But from an
I
ally
took Lotan.
point...
I took Lotan in the tournament I went to.
Oh,
I literally I took Lotan to a 4-1. Only lost to Archaon Slaves to Darkness with Lotan.
Right.
He is good. He's 75 points.
He's always been a joke. He's always been a joke with Oki and that. But like, okay, there's some good use still with. He's still, and maybe because the value of a reroll, right? Like in second edition, there was reroll ones everywhere. Now that rerolls are being stripped from the game, having a reroll is now valuable. So okay, all right, it's something worth considering. I think the challenge that I'm finding a lot of my list is because things went up in points. You just can't put in everything in your 2K list. It's almost like I want to go back to Warhammer Fantasy when lists were all 2,250 or 2,500, which again defeats the purpose of what we're doing. And we'll be taking one whole day to play a game.
Yeah. In terms of allies, Ether Wings, they're still a good option. I don't take them myself.
Even with the points going up, because they're now 65 points at time of recording.
100% no now. And the reason for that is even at 45, Tree Revs. Tree Revenants are fantastic allies for Deepkin. 80 points for a unit that can teleport anywhere on the board 9 away every single turn with no restrictions. Amazing. They're so cheap. The one thing that Deepkin doesn't have is a teleport. They've got come on from the board edge once. They do not have the ability to teleport. So Tree Revs for 80 points that you can keep teleporting around. They work really just as well if you need to block shooting. Like if you don't want to use a unit of Ishlane to massive overshooting that will blow through a unit of Ishlane, put 80 points of Tree Revs as the closest unit. They have to shoot them. Literally,
why wouldn't you go Shadow Warrior? Not Shadow Warriors, Shadow Stalkers, the Daughters of Cain one, because for an extra 20 or 30 odd points, you would get more wounds. You would get the -1 to be hit in shooting or in combat. Sorry, it's -1 to hit, and you still get the teleporting around the table, unlike the Canary and the Shadow Warriors.
The points and for the role they're filling, you're spending more points on a unit that you basically are going to throw away, or you just want to teleport to grab something. You do not care about the resilience in that unit. It is just what can you get on the board for as little points as possible that teleports every turn. Tree Revs, they are fantastic. I took 2 units of them in the tournament. They were great. They are the Vice, that mission. Oh my god! You just put your 2 units of Tree Revs on the back corner where the objectives are. The rest of your army goes off. If your opponent walks forward, because most people go, cool, I've scored them, I want to run off them turn 1 because they're going to move here. If your opponent walks forward, you take them. So you force your opponent to often have to commit more than you're committing points wise to hold their objectives. Otherwise, you take them off. In that tournament, I literally had to tell my opponent turn 1, do you want to just move back? Because he ran forward and I went, if you don't move back right now, you have just lost the game because I will teleport my True Revs and take that. So, and I told him, you're going to lose right now. Move them back because I genuinely don't want to win like that turn 1. But you have to think about it because they can do it and they're fantastic. They are a genuine, really good ally choice. And you lose that if you take Gotrek as well because he fills all your ally points. So that's another downside to putting him in. Most lists I've been putting 5 True Revs in, other than obviously the list I just sent there, because I proper min-maxed it exactly where I could find the points to get to.
Tree Revs are great. Tree Revs are so good, the way pipes. What about durable heroes? What about something like Celestant Prime that's now gotten a 4-up ward save, the Frostheart Phoenix? Would they be an allied consideration? Or I guess the challenge is that where does that 300 odd points come from? Like, are you dropping the Eidolon? Are you dropping the Turtle? Where do those points come from?
Whenever you're talking to that kind of ally, it's what are you losing? I've found that I've only really got about that 120, 150 kind of points that I'm usually playing with, because otherwise I'm like, oh, I don't have as many units of Ishlane as I'd like. I might consider the Prime now that he's got a 4-up ward and he's not just going to disappear. Give me some mortal wound output, and the Ren 3 will be nice, just to help me deal with some of that high armor. I might look back and consider him. He's an okay option. Frostheart Phoenix as well, not a bad shout. Him running around with the turtle, helping that survive with the -1 to wound aura. It gives you the second monster, which I said I think would be really nice for the list. Points wise, it might fit in. It's a bit cheaper than 2 Leviadons. I hadn't really thought about it, to be honest, because the Deepkin have got weird. They've still got the old allies table, I think. So I don't think they have Cities of Sigmar. And I haven't actually.
I'm looking at it now. Unless it's been updated, it's the Darkling Covens, it's the
Yeah.
Daughters of Cain, Eldritch Council, Order Serpentis, Scourge Privateers, Shadow Blades. Oh, so you can't. Oh, Eldritch
So you
Council?
don't think-
No.
So I don't think you can take the Frostheart Phoenix.
Unless it's been changed in obviously in FAQ. But I'm looking at the battle time, and that's you can do Wanderers, you can do Sylvaneth, you can do Stormcast. So you could do the Stormcast stuff, but yeah, maybe not the. Someone's telling me that you can ally them now, cities with an elf tag. Okay, cool. That's been updated. Great. That would make sense.
I was thinking about cities allies the other day because I was like, oh, can I put a battle mage in? Because if I put a Gur battle mage in,
the Gur battle mage is so good.
Because with Youthan turn 1 run and charge, +2 to run, +2 to charge, it'd just be amazing on stuff. But then I looked at the allies table, and obviously I was like, I have a feeling they updated this with GHB, but I didn't have my book with me, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure if he can, but obviously he's not an elf, so you can't obviously ally him in. But yeah, the Frostheart Phoenix actually might be a shout. The good thing is I have both the painted Frostheart and both the painted Prime, and they're some of my nicer painted models, so I could try both immediately and let you know. But
cool.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself in a game where you'd really need more monsters, or if you're finding you just don't have enough hero hammer for in the meta that you're currently playing, and we are on the cusp of Stormcast and Cruel Boys coming in, and we don't know how that's going to shake up the meta. I think Cruel Boys, for example, is going to keep some of these monster heavies armies honest, and you may not find them at the top tables, so there might be more in the middle tables, or you might find them much lower. So maybe not much lower, but like they're going to keep them honest, and I think it might change the trajectory of Suns. Anything that's heavily relying on monsters. Soul Blight is another example. They're probably going to. It's a bad matchup for them.
Yeah, but I think really what we're saying is like the game is in a really good place right now, where there's so many. Like even all the old armies, I think they play really well. You've seen Gargants really come into their own. I think they were definitely designed for third, now having seen third and how they play and how strong they are. But loads of the old books fit really well. I think Nurgle's really good, although that's probably going to be one of the early ones to change. Soulblight's great. I think
competitively in the majors, every army has gone 4-1 at least once. And it's including Gits. Gits has gone 4-1. Like literally everyone has gone 4-1. So we are in a weird meta right now. It's kind of settling, and give this a couple of months, and then we can kind of see what you're building towards. But I think you've got a lot of great options to build something that's viable competitively and seasoned to taste. If you love your combat eels, cool. You do you. Take some of the theory Chris is talking about, put it into your list. If you prefer, I don't know, double turtles, if you're like me who's an idiot and wants to go out and buy 4 turtles, put bandanas on them, and then run them on the table, go do it.
Rob Kern's done it. He did it at Sydney Slaughter again, right?
I did it. I always wanted to do that. And I think I never could. But shout out to Rob Kearns then. What a legend.
Yeah, the 4 turtles I think is legit. I think I don't know. I think you lose a little bit around it, but they're really good. Like if I could just have one done and painted, I would 100% run a double turtle list to try it out. The issue for me is I'm getting towards the end of painting everything I have, which is a lot of stuff, and I'm like, I keep writing different lists that it's like, oh, but then I'd have to buy this and then paint it, and I kind of just want to move on so that I can start painting my next army and just play with everything. But yeah, the Leviadon's great. I think 2 turtles is probably the sweet spot, I think. But they are good. You could definitely take more than 2 and still not have a terrible game.
I mean, I was even trying to make a joke about you. I'm like, yeah, Lotan's trash. You're like, no, Lotan's trash. Cool. Lotan is not trash. Sounds like most things are pretty viable right now. Chris, you are on the internet. You are wounded mortally on Twitter because you're weird and you can't get the proper podcast name You are on Mortally Wounded podcast.
There's a bloke out there that apparently made a tweet 10 years ago, made one tweet and doesn't use Twitter anymore, but he took the hashtag. He took the Twitter name, so I can't have it. But yes.
But if people want to talk more about you, more to you, clearly you can go to Twitter. You've got you're very active there. Wounded Mortally. I'll put the description stuff below, and people can tweet you. Any shout outs or any? Obviously, listen to the podcast. You've got a great podcast. Need to put out more episodes. You and James.
Yeah, we've been talking recently. We're gonna get a couple recorded soon. I think we might even be doing a Halloween spooktacular. So I'll let you think what that might be about. But yeah, we'll try and get some more guests on and stuff. But yeah, we're definitely going to record more. So yeah, I'll shout out James. He's the hobbyist of the two of us. He puts out amazing stuff. He's always learning new techniques, and his Soul Blight army is looking amazing right now. He's posting loads of pictures of zombies and stuff. So I'm hoping he's going to start smashing it on the tables as well soon, because zombies are super good. So,
I haven't seen the zombies yet. I think people have been talking a lot about zombies, but no one has. I've not seen a list with like a really competitive, well-performed list with the big block of zombies. Everyone seems to be going Graveguard and Blood Knights, and
so I think it's Anzo Sam Thompson. He was playing Kerr in the final round at Toowoomba Open, so went 4-1. He came 4th or 5th, I think. Just because there was a draw for 2 and 3 on the podium. But he's running 60 to 80 zombies. He's doing super well with Soul Blight, really good. So yeah, he's doing really well with zombies. I think they did well over in the US recently, but they're really good. But yeah, I'll shout out Corey as well. We've been playing games now. I think we've got finally the dream of a regular weekly games night, which may well become 2 or 3. So we're playing. That's how I've been practicing against Cruel Boys and learning all their dirty tricks recently, and stuff. So yeah, I'll shout out Corey as well.
All right, big love to the Queenslanders and James as well. But go check out Mortally Wounded podcast. Go check them out. They do good stuff. And we've obviously been friends for a long time, since Age of Sigmar really kicked off in the Sydney community, and then Chris betrayed us and jumped over the border. But Chris, it's always been a pleasure having you on the channel. Thank you for your insights. You all know the drill by now. Like, subscribe, hashtag best episode ever. Give Chris some love. And let me know how you are building your Deepkin. Is Chris wrong? Is Thrall blocks really good? Is it the meta of the aspect of the sea? Like, is there some type of, I don't know, list? I want someone to prove me right. Like someone prove me wrong with the aspect of the sea. Someone do it, please.
It won't be me.
All right. Well, someone prove me wrong. Put it in the chat. Until next time, I don't know. Don't forget your triumph. I keep forgetting my triumph, but don't you forget it. All right. Bye. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more 6s.